Welcome to Uncontained, episode 194. How is everybody doing out there during the whole coronavirus lockdown? I know a lot of people are out there getting stir crazy, not knowing what to do, not knowing what day of the week it is, even without everybody in the office reminding them, oh, Monday, I hate Monday. Oh, Tuesday, it's a day closer to the weekend. Wednesday, halfway there. Oh, one more day till Friday. Then, hey, it's Friday. And then, yeah, it sometimes without all those people just reminding you every day of the week what day it is, you forget because they all turn out to be the same. So, just stick it out. We'll do it together. I know some people are doing like social distance, social hours, like over the web using Zoom or whatever they choose to do. Maybe I'll have to do one of those for Uncontained with some listeners. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll maybe post about that and get something going. So, yeah, what have you guys been up to? Have a lot of free time on your hands. I got something for you to help keep your mind busy, at least for a little while here. A brand new episode of Uncontained with the host of the Open Mic podcast, Brett Allan. It's really cool. Since we recorded this interview, I saw that he has posted an interview with a past guest of mine, Erik Stolhanske from the Borken Lizard crew, also, Super Troopers, Beer Fest, and all those movies that the Borken Lizard guys did. And it'll go along with part of the conversation that we had in the show, talking about how an interview with one guest can be completely different depending on the host. So I am looking forward to going and checking that out and listening to his interview with Erik Stolhanske on the Open Mic podcast. So I don't want to keep you waiting too much longer. I know you can only organize the sock drawer over and over again so many times before you lose your mind. Here's something to take your mind off the coronavirus completely for the next 45 minutes or so. Take a listen. This is my interview with the host of the Open Mic podcast, Brett Allan. How are you doing today, Brett, and welcome to Uncontained.
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be on your awesome show. I've listened to a few episodes, and I like it, so I'm happy to be here. I like the vibe.
All right, man. Thank you. And I dig your show as well. You have had some really cool guests on, including like Evan Carmichael, guy from the podcast school. Listen to that episode today.
Dave Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, so you have some really good guests on, man. So what got you started down the path of podcasting?
Sure. Yeah, so I have talked to some amazing people, and I've been doing it now for a little over 2 years. And I have a background in radio and production. So I'm a graduate. I went to the New Mexico Broadcasting Academy, and I actually used to be a DJ for a Christian radio station there.
Nice.
88.3. At the time, it was static radio. It's changed. It's rebranded several times since then. But I just have always had a natural interest in radio and that sort of thing and talking to people. I feel like, we all have certain gifts and abilities. And for me, one of those things in particular is just connecting with people very easily and naturally. So I'd been a fan of podcasting for a long time. I'd always listened to NPR, and I liked how those guys did things. They to me, that was the standard of how podcasting should be done.
Okay.
Those types of shows. And I was a fan of Joe Rogan, and of course Adam Carolla was definitely in that top 5 for me as far as like who I looked up to. And so I saw that he was at the time, he had this podcasting class, and at the time I kind of thought that was the way to do it. And then I kind of learned eventually that there's many other resources out there. But anyway, I digress. So I liked that. And originally when I started, I saw an advertisement on Facebook for Anchor, which the cool thing about that was at the time is that you could do it from your phone.
Okay.
I didn't have the money or resources at the time to invest in a microphone or, recording equipment or even a laptop. It just to me, the way I was looking at it, it just seemed like it was a way too expensive to do it. So I thought, well, I like this, so I can do it from my phone. And so that's how I got started. And
Okay.
then I kind of got bit by the bug because when I started it, I was just doing like a journey type podcast where I was interviewing like, friends, and I was talking about my divorce and being a single dad. And it really was just like therapeutic for me to just do that. Well, then I got turned on to another website that you could go on to, and you could find people to interview for your podcast. These were just regular people, no celebrities or entrepreneurs or any kind of influencers that I talk to now.
Okay.
And I came across this movie critic, Nell Minow, who is a critic for Roger Ebert. She works for Roger Ebert. She does a whole bunch of other things. And I interviewed her, and that's how it started. And I just thought, how cool is it to be able to talk to these types of people that I wouldn't normally have a conversation with, but because of this outlet of podcasting, I can do it. And so one thing led to another. I'd interviewed more friends, and then I interviewed another friend who was a filmmaker, and just kept building and building. And just the law of returns and investment in something, and I think you kind of start to see the benefits. And then one thing led to another, and I'm interviewing Susan C. Bennett, the original voice of Siri. I'm interviewing Tanya Banks, the star of Little Women LA, Lyris Cross, Project Runway, and not just name dropping, but I mean, I feel like I really put the time in, and now I have a publicist, and I have people who pitch me guests, and it's crazy. Like, I'm super thankful for it. I took a long break, and we can talk about that later, but in any case, that's how I got started, and I love it. It's therapeutic for me, and I get to talk to other amazing podcast hosts like yourself, and just have fun. And so that's kind of how I got here.
Okay, right on, man. So I want to take a step back. You mentioned that you did radio for a while. I did radio myself as well. I worked at a rock station back in my home state of Iowa, 94.1 KRNA. And I don't know, there's some similarities in podcasting to radio, but there's a lot of differences too. Like, did you have any challenges switching modes from like being a radio station DJ to long form interviews?
So I think the skill set that I got from being a DJ was how to talk, how to handle a microphone, how to phrasing, how to ask questions, and that sort of thing. And so I think that gave me like a lot of the technical stuff that I
Okay.
feel like, at least to me, is important when it comes to podcasting, like microphone proximity, just kind of like the technical stuff of things, and just got me comfortable talking on the radio. Hey, it's brand new song from Jeremy Camp here on 88.3. Check it out. He's, that kind of thing, just as an example. And so it taught me all the technical stuff. But then when I started doing this, again, I was just doing solo stuff for the longest time. And when I listen to it now, I'm like, ugh, I don't like that. But it kind of got me to a place where I'm like, well, that was just the beginning, and I'm still learning and doing things. But I feel like what kind of where the challenge has come is when I'm interviewing some of these people, and I have a very limited time frame in order to talk to them. Like, let's say they'll tell me this guest is available for 30 minutes. These are the things that you need to talk about. You can't talk about these things. And some people don't like that. I don't mind it, but I'm finally comfortable in my niche and who I talk to and who I am as an interviewer. So I've adjusted to it. So there was a little bit of a learning curve, but when you have one shot to talk to somebody that you will probably never ever talk to again, you just kind of
Yes.
learn and force yourself to just bear down and deal with it.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those interviews, like where it's like, okay, they first start out, be like, okay, I only have like 15 minutes. I'm like, whoa, my show's typically about an hour long. And they're like, can you do a half hour? I was like, okay, I can make that work. Like Erik Stolhanske, he was Rabbit in Super Troopers. Like he had like a tight schedule that, had to be met. So those are like,
Yeah, yeah.
you got to really pick what you want to bring out, like get to the point and like roll and just go with what you can get on those in a way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so true. And like the same thing, like when I interviewed John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, they said you have 15 minutes to talk to him. And literally, like there was a clock in the background when we were recording it where I could just see the ticker going down, 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 down. So, and some of these people, like Evan Carmichael, you mentioned him at the intro of the
Yeah.
show. The thing about Evan is like I I talked to his people like at least 2 weeks, if not more, leading up to when he actually came on my show. So every week they would just send like a little video and saying, okay, you're getting closer to interviewing Evan. And one of his biggest things was, don't spend a lot of time, going over the format with me. Let's just jump right in. And so I think I had 25 minutes with him
Okay.
when we interviewed. And yeah, I mean, that was it. And so I had a list of questions, and I typically have questions that I'm going to ask. But for mostly now, a lot of these people, I've kind of learned to like when my publicist reaches out to me and says, hey, you know, this is somebody that I think you should have, she will typically say, this is what you should focus on when you're interviewing her. So I've got some guests that are coming that I'm going to be recording in April. And so I've just kind of gotten to a point where I've got, you know how it is, man. You get into a
Oh
groove
yeah.
and you have your style and you're like, okay, this is how I'm going to go about it, and we're conversationalists, and it's weird because like everybody kept saying, you have a very different interview style. It's very unique, but I like it. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm just being me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you just kind of learn to roll with the punches for sure.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And it's amazing how like one person interviewing somebody can be completely different than another person interviewing somebody, just because of their
Yeah, yeah, of
style, their
course.
conversation. Like I would listen to Nerdist podcast or ID10T now with Chris Hardwick, and then WTF with Mark Maron. They'd have the same guest on, but it'd be like a completely different interview.
Totally different.
So
Totally different.
it's kind of cool hearing the interview style of people, and I like the more conversational podcast hosts that keep it like
Yeah.
just talking, like you're meeting at a bar or something like that.
Yeah, I think it just kind of like mutes out a lot of the pretentiousness that can occur. But again, like some of these people though, it can also go on the opposite side of things. And because they're so trained and because they do so many types of interviews that it's hard to get that conversational side out of them, and they just want to answer the question and then move on. And so like I try and approach things where it's more open-ended, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, asking open-ended questions.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, okay, so now what? And before you know it, it can become very uncomfortable very fast. And that's not fun at all.
No, no. So, like if you are coming across somebody who's just giving you, like, you can tell they're rehearsed answers, or they give you answers over and over, the same answer over and over again. Um, Asking open-ended questions, like you mentioned, is good. But are there any other techniques that you use to draw more information out of them?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and I try to do this, so we're using Squadcast, Zach Moreno and his crew. They've come up with this amazing software. So for those listening, we can see each other. Aaron and I can see each other.
Yes.
And so we're able to talk and have a conversation. So I do Squadcast sometimes, but a lot of these folks that I talk to, they don't have the tech savvy or the ability to come on and jump on a computer. So I use Zoom a lot because it's easy for them to call in, and you can have this whole debate about sound quality, but I feel like I what I might lack maybe in certain areas I make up for in content. So I think this is great. I try and do video interviews with everybody because what it does is it takes that wall down, and there's a connection that happens between you and I because we're looking at each other.
Definitely.
So I think so to really answer your question, there's that, but then definitely answering or asking open-ended questions, or just trying to get people to talk about themselves. I mean, that's the most popular topic that we all have, is we like to talk about ourselves. So if I was interviewing you, I'd say, so you have this podcast and you've been doing it, uncontained for, let's say, how long?
4 years now.
4 years. So let's say you're doing this podcast, you've been doing it for 4 years. You've interviewed some pretty outstanding people. Let's say you interviewed Oliver Graves. I listened to that one.
Okay.
So I would say, okay, what makes him different as a guest than any other celebrity that you could have? So I'm trying to or how did that interview make you feel, or those types of things. So kind of just taking like a psychological approach about it, and just not necessarily just saying, tell me about it, but let's tell me about it. And then what did you get from it? If that makes any sense. So just kind of like trying to dig past the layers and really get to the heart of what's happening.
Yeah, and then you will actually have to ask me that question when I am a guest on your show, which will be coming up here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I like Oliver. He's great. That's funny that you interviewed him. I remember him from AGT.
Yeah. That I like saw him on there, and then came across him like a video on Facebook of him like going back to it. And did you ever get into Mitch Hedberg? Like stand-up comedian?
Yeah. I was a big fan of his. Yeah, they're kind of similar.
He's like a goth version of Mitch Hedberg in a way, like a darker Mitch Hedberg, and I really love that. Like, it takes a lot to do a whole set with a one-liners almost.
Yeah, and that was the thing that I felt people missed about him, was like, I just don't think that they got what he was trying to do. But he's a funny guy. He's a funny guy. But that was a great interview, by the way. So I liked that.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you. But yeah, we can talk more about that later. But this episode is focusing on you right now, my friend.
Thank you.
I'll share things as I go along, but
Cool, man.
I could talk about myself on my podcast all the time, which happens from time to time, but it's more about you. Now, I was listening to your podcast, and you said that you were a pastor, correct?
A youth pastor. Yeah, I was.
Okay. So are you still doing that, or get out of that and into podcasting, or?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I was doing that when I was living in New Mexico. But I did stop doing it once I moved here, and was getting married at the time to my now ex-wife. But I did it for years. That's really kind of what some of those tenets I think are still a part of what makes me who I am, and I don't make bones about it. But I also don't just throw it in people's faces either.
Okay.
But I think the training that I received from that, and how to counsel people and how to talk to people, is what also helps me interview people. Biblical counseling type classes, there's things that they teach you, how to talk to people and how to have a conversation and how to listen. And I think listening, that's another thing, is how can you listen? If you ask a question, sometimes I used to do this. You have a tendency to just kind of jump in and, oh yeah, that makes sense, but just let them talk. And I think that's what works for me. So I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, once you are ordained and you're a pastor, that title does not ever leave you, but I don't actively participate. I mean, I have my life is so different now, but I mean, I pastor my kid, I guess you could say, and that really just is a fancy term for, shepherd or leader. But it was part of my life, and I don't regret any of it, but I don't necessarily participated anymore, to answer your question more directly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You actually went ahead and answered like my follow-up question to that without asking. Was going to be like, how did that like does that play a role in your podcasting
Oh,
and
absolutely,
the
it does.
listening aspect and counseling aspect? It does show through too. You can tell like when a host is actually listening or just thinking of what they're going to say next. You know?
Yeah, and that can be dangerous too.
It can be. And you got to walk that fine line though, because you want to be able to say something next, but you don't want to be like, just like, oh yeah, I was just listening.
Yeah, exactly.
But people get that down as they go,
Sure.
Now you mentioned that you have a publicist. Like, when
Yeah.
did you decide that you were ready to get a publicist, and how did that all come about?
Well, it's not something that I kind of like just it kind of happened as a happy accident. So it's kind of there's a bit of a story behind it, but I just had been interviewing a lot of people, and I was starting to get more into like interviewing the entrepreneurs, the influencers and the YouTubers, all these different types of people. And I became really good friends with an influencer, and I helped her, launch her podcast. But she had a publicist, and we just kind of kicked it off really well. And um, she helps me out quite a bit, but I don't really know, like I didn't really decide. It just kind of happened by accident. And so, you know, she just kept giving me people, and she's helped me develop like a show one sheet. She helped me with my website. She helped me with a lot of different things. Normally you pay a lot of money to these people, but she's been very kind and doesn't charge me. And she's been also a very good reference. So I've gone after some other bigger names. I've gotten some yeses, some nos, but she vouches for me in that regard.
Okay.
And so like if I have a guest and I don't really know much about them, or she might say, "Hey, here's some information about this person." And then I have other publicist agencies that I work with, and I just got connected with them because I reached out and wanted to like book a certain guest, and they would say, "Well, that guest is not available right now, but how about this?" And so I would take maybe the person that's less famous, or you know, like with Kelly of, Jade Umbrella, Kelly Springer or Kelly K, uh my publicist, that I work with, and who helps and reps. With her, it was just more like, "Hey, who do you have that you think would be a good fit?" And then it's all about building relationships. That's what it comes down to. And, building trust, and just, there's a savvy, and a way to do things and how to talk to people. So she's helped me out a ton. She helped me out with my pitch letter for guests, like I said, in my show one sheet. And we've just worked really well together. And so in turn, I put kind of some of her people on that she's working with, that she's maybe rebranding or don't have a lot of interview experience. And so I'll take them on my show because, I'm probably the easiest interview that they're going to have. And I'm not going to ask them any gotcha questions or anything like that. It's just going to be more of, "Hey, let's talk about this, let's talk about that." And that's kind of how we got started.
Okay. All right. Very cool, man. So, yeah, those networking and those connections are huge, man.
That's what it's all about.
That's how I've gotten some of my more known guests, such as Rob Van Dam and stuff like that. It's from a comedian and a filmmaker that I had on the show before. So I'm not saying that just to toot my own horn, but it's more like just stay in contact with the people you interview. That's what I
Yeah. You don't want to burn any bridges, because I will tell you that it's funny. I started working with Kelly Springer, and then I started working with Claudia Green over at Mayhem and all the people that she reps, and Marcy Walters over at Lasting Legacy, all three of them, Kelly Teamer at Scribe Media. Like they all had somebody that I wanted to get at first. Um, you know, and that person wasn't available, but they gave me somebody else. And the thing that I learned is that you might not get that one person that you want, but you might get the next version of that person, or the
Okay.
next, David Goggins. You might get the next, I don't know. And so you just never know who you're going to get, but you just build those relationships, and you just keep working, and then eventually you get to a point where you can make a big ask and they might say, okay, sure, I'll try. I've just learned some people just don't want to do interviews unless they have something to promote.
Yeah.
um and so there's that, but a lot of the people I have something that they're currently promoting or will be promoting. And that's how that part works.
All right, man. Very cool. Very cool. So before we jump into my second half of the show, the 5 questions that I typically ask every guest, where do you see open mic going from here? Like, what's next?
Ooh, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm not really sure that I know how to answer that. Like, I want to continue to interview great people and provide great content and provide things that will benefit my audience, but I also want to talk to people that I find interesting. So, as many great guests as I've had, I've said no to a lot of people as well. Um, so I think like I just want to keep I think I want to keep putting out good content and finding great guests and talking about things that are interesting, and to me that is success to me. If you asked me, do you find your show to be successful, I would say absolutely. I have a good this and a good that, and the numbers, and those things are important, but at the end of the day, are you putting out something that you're proud of, that you would say, am I going for good enough and just doing it? Then I think that's okay. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, that's where I see my show going. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to be, the next, uh, you know, Jay Leno. I don't know, or any of these
I
talk
got
show
you.
people. That's not really what I'm going for. I want to reach as many people as possible, and I will do what it takes to get to that place, ethically, of course, and just having more amazing people on my show. So that's kind of where I see things going.
Right on, right on. And is there like the one guest that you're gunning for right now? Is there like, if I could get this guy, just put it out
Always.
there into the anybody in particular right now?
Oh geez. Like I mean Dr. Drew Pensky, that's always been like, I would love to talk to him. Um, I think he's just fantastic. There's just so many people that I would love to talk to. Gwyneth Paltrow, I would love to have a conversation with her. I just find those people so interesting. Chris Martin from Coldplay. I mean, and that's the thing, is some of these people like that I've pitched, or anybody, they're a little bit more accessible than you might think.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that podcasting is so new and so different that a lot of these people say yes because it's an opportunity for them to reach a different audience than they might not normally reach, with their typical press. And so that's, I think, where I attribute part of my success is just in the fact that, you just have to ask. But yeah, some of those people, I mean, I have a whole list of people that I would love to talk to. And but at the same time, you know some of them may happen sooner than later, or they may never happen. I don't know, but never hurts to dream.
There you go, man. There you go. And that transitions perfectly into my next question here. I know you've given a lot of great advice on the show already, but what advice would you have for somebody who is looking to get started in podcasting?
Just do it. Just do it. Like, if you sit around and you just talk about it, then you'll never do it. And I feel like, you know and it sounds like pretty trite types of advice, but it's really true. Like, starting a podcast is not that hard. It's really not. And you can take courses. I have a few people that I would recommend. You just have to do it. You get a microphone, you get a computer, the editing. You could start a podcast for less than like a couple $100 very easily. I mean, these microphones were like $70.
Yeah.
Get a webcam, get a computer that's got some decent speed, and just do it. And it's going to suck at first, and that's okay, but that's just going to only make you better. And I certainly don't feel like I have arrived. I feel like I have a long way to go. But, 2 years ago, I would have never imagined that I would be interviewing the voice of Siri, Susan Bennett. But you just start building, and eventually I think the law of attraction, you just put in, and what you put in you'll get out. If you put little effort in, you'll get little back. But if you put a lot of effort in, you're willing to make the mistakes and just go for it, then I think that's half the battle right there. Just do it. Start and see what happens. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. But if it does work, you'll never know until you try it.
Yeah, definitely. And the one, if you're like hung up on one thing, chances are it's not that big of a thing as it was. Like one
No.
thing that kept me like turned out to be nothing. I don't even think about it anymore, but I was like, what is an RSS feed? It sounds difficult. I need to figure
Oh
that out.
yeah.
Like, how do I do that? And it's nothing, it's like basically the web address of your show, like that it pulls from on
Exactly.
iTunes, but you don't really have to do anything to set it up. I was like psyching
No.
myself out, and
That's why I liked Anchor, because it did everything for you. All you had to do was just record, add music, edit. I mean, I'm a lot more meticulous, and I'm a perfectionist, and so I don't want to put out what I feel is crap. So, I mean, I've gotten a little loose on my editing, but I mean, there's a little bit of experience under my belt. But yeah, you can get hung up, like you said, on all these technical things. But, I use Simplecast. It's easy. I mean, I moved from Anchor to Simplecast because I wanted to get more like information about my listeners, where they were coming from, downloads, how long people were listening to a show. And so I'm more interested in that type of thing now, so I can kind of
okay.
pivot and decide where I want to go with things. But yeah, I mean, don't get hung up on the technical stuff. I watched like 2 YouTube videos, excuse me, on how to edit audio. And then now I mean, there's all kinds of things. Aphonic is, you just upload your audio and it levels everything out for you, and it's free for like the first few hours, and there's a whole community out there that will be willing to help you. It's just do it, and don't get hung up on things like you said, because if you do,
Fair enough.
you'll never get there. You'll just keep wishing, well, what would it be like if I had done this?
Definitely, man. Definitely. Great advice to just get out there and do it. Now, what are you currently doing to promote yourself right now, Brett?
Well, right now, like I said, we talked about this a little, I think, before tape, but a lot of those interviews that you heard some of them were from when I was on one feed to another that I'm currently migrating over. But I've got a bunch of new guests. I'm trying to focus on more of a social presence and building my audience that way. So I'm working on trying to work on my social presence on Twitter and Facebook, and just really and focus on quality over quantity. And so I'm doing that, and just really trying to boost what I'm currently doing, and just make the best out of it, and just do everything I can the best I can.
Okay.
And I'm also connecting with other podcasters. We rise by lifting each other up, and so trying to do show swaps with people, and uh support my fellow podcasters however I can, and again, putting in and getting out, and not just doing it to get something, but just because I want to support this art form of podcasting.
Perfect, man. I love that. I love that outlook. One person gets shine, we all get shine in a way,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's not, you know I am a little bit cagey when it comes to certain things, but I'm willing to make a guest referral with somebody if it's somebody that I know that I can trust and isn't going to screw me, or not be able to handle somebody that I give them, because I do get things that come my way and they go, do you have some suggestions that, um, but I'm, as far as like, if anybody comes to me for advice or asks me, just trying to jump on those threads, what kind of microphone, the Pod Sound School guys, Veronica and Steve, they put out such, I wish they were around when I started this thing, because I would have saved myself a lot of time and headache. But yeah, if one person, we shine, everybody gets shine, and we're a family and we're in this together.
I hear that, man. I hear that. All right. So now this is kind of a two-part question. It's about a hardship and a highlight. We'll start out with the hardship and we'll roll on from there. So what is like a hardship that you've come across during your podcasting career that you care to share with the Uncontained audience?
Yeah, well, we'll just talk about what I went through with my rebrand. I I was kind of like the podcast whore. I just said yes to everybody. And I kind of just, I wanted to talk to people just to talk to people. And I got so stressed out. Like I had like an existential breakdown. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And then everything just kind of started to fall apart. My computer became damaged. I lost a bunch of interviews that I did.
Oh,
Yeah, it was rough. And then I thought, well, the open mic podcast with Brett Allan, you know, it's not really what I want it to be. Maybe it could be the Brett Allan show. And then I just got so caught up in it. I took like a 6-month break. I'm like, I'm not interested in this anymore. There's pod fade, and then I just burnt out. I was like, I'm done. I could care less about this anymore. But fortunately, I maintained all my relationships with people, and I was able to jump back in pretty successfully. But it was horrible. I got sick and tired of it. I just was like, this is dumb. I don't want to talk to beauty influencers anymore. I don't want to talk to celebrities. I don't want to talk to these reality star people. That's just the same garbage. But and then I stopped, and then here I am again, fortunately. But it was tough. Like, it was stressful. I had health issues. I had parenting issues with my ex-wife. She moved away with my kid, and it was just a real mess. And it took about a
wow.
year or so to kind of bounce back and to really recover from all of that and start recording again.
Wow, yeah, dude, that sounds like quite the hardship, and it is stressful sometimes podcasting too, without all of that other stuff
Yeah,
that you had to deal with, the wife moving away with your kid and health issues and all that stuff. So, yeah, sometimes, I recently went from doing every week to putting a show out every other week, just because I was running into that wall where I didn't have time to promote, or it just seemed like I was trying to get a guest, then record the show, edit, put it out, get another guest, and just repeat the vicious cycle without growing anywhere.
sure.
So yeah, it's good to have that state of mind, or that presence of mind, that's the word I'm looking for, to know that you need to step away for a minute.
Absolutely.
All right, so we talked about the hardship. Now let's talk about a highlight. So what would be a highlight that you care to share?
Well, I think all of that dark tunnel coming to an end and being able to record again. The support of my fellow podcasters. And I think that's definitely it. I love it. And I finally have been able to just embrace who I am as a person and as a podcaster and as an interviewer. And this is just my power spot. And I am able to attract a lot of great people. And so I'm going to do that. But I also feel like, I like being on the other side of the mic. So when you reached out to interview me, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. And I want to do more of this, and really, because it's not just all about the one thing. It's a cumulative thing. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Right. And
Yes.
so, it, it's a two-way street. Right. And I think that for me is learning to just, and again, like I was doing like a show every day. That was ridiculous. So
That, that's
two
insane.
two a week, one new guest on a Monday, and then like a recast of something on Friday, and just re-promoting somebody that I've had before, because I had a bunch of episodes that I didn't get to release, and so some of those people I just now released. And the dark, another part of the dark part, I forgot to mention, this was just all these people reaching out, saying, hey, where are you, what are you doing? But I'm just thankful I got through it, and I'm able to be here again.
Definitely, man. Me too. I'm glad you got through it. I'm glad I found your podcast. And
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Likewise.
yeah, thank you, man. I'm really enjoying going through listening to your episodes. So now I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up, and I'll let you out of here. Now, we've heard a lot about how you got into podcasting, kind of what you look for in a guest. But as far as for your listener, like, what experience do you want them to have? Like, what do you want them to take away and remember when they listen to the Open Mic podcast?
Well, I think I want people to feel like that, that they're kind of like a fly on the wall listening to a conversation that they might not normally get to listen to. And I really try and humanize these people and just make them accessible to them, and not just look at them and go, ooh, this person is this or that. And so I really want them to be able to connect with my guest. And so that's how I try and structure my style and my questions around, is to be able to connect on the same level that I'm able to connect with them. And that's really what I'm striving for. And to walk away with at least one brick to put in the wall of whatever it is that they're building in their life, and go, oh, this is great, and I'm so glad I found your show.
All right, cool, man. So just give them that one thing they can, at least one thing they can take away, and put that towards something that they're working on.
Absolutely.
Find that one more piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome, man. I have, and to attest to that, I have kind of pulled out a few things from the episodes I listened to. The first one I listened to was the social media expert lady.
Rachel Peterson. Yeah. And that's funny. That was one that I actually recorded like over a year ago that never got released. And fortunately, she was still behind the episode. But yeah, Rachel Peterson. Yeah, she was great.
Okay, yeah. So like I took some stuff from that, and also like as you were talking to Evan Carmichael and a few other episodes, I've been able to take little things out of there. Like, if you're asking an influencer a question, make sure you ask them something that you mean, that you want to know the
Exactly.
answer to, not just like something they've heard like 100 times. So when you want to start a podcast, like what's the first step? That you can find on YouTube,
Just Google it. It's out
Yeah.
there. How do I get I think the question that if I remember, was somebody asked him, how do I get a blue check mark on my Instagram?
That's it.
And he sent them a video back. That's how he responds to people, is via video. And he said, are you sure? Like, this is the one chance that you have to ask me something, and are you absolutely positive that's the question that you want to ask? Because if I were you, I would rethink that. Yeah, I remember that very well. That was funny.
That's cool that he gave him a second chance to ask something, though, instead of just
that's the kind of guy. That's the kind of guy he is. He's very gracious.
Right on. Very cool, man. So I have one more question for you. Before we jump into that question, where can people find you online? What is your corner of the internet?
The Open Mic Podcast.show, Brett's Open Mic on Twitter, Brett Allan on Facebook, and the same on Instagram. But the Open Mic Podcast.show is where all my episodes hang out. And I'm trying to be more active on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Okay. All right. Very cool. And if you send me those links, I'll include those in the show notes.
Sure.
People can find you and ask you how to get the blue check mark if they really want to.
You're asking the wrong guy. I don't have the answer to that. You can pay for it. I mean, if you got 10 grand laying around, you can go to a publicist and they'll get it for you. It's not hard. But I'll tell you, as we joke about that, but I talk to a lot of people that have that check mark. It doesn't mean anything
Yeah.
other than it just says they are who they say they are in that regard. But past that, doesn't mean squat.
I hear that. I hear that. All right, man. So check the show notes and you'll be able to find Brett's contact information. And it's been great talking to you, man. I appreciate you taking the time out of your night to come on my show and share your story and your wisdom with all my listeners here on Uncontained. Now, I have that one final question for you. It's the title question of the show. Brett Montgomery, how do you live uncontained?
Everything that motivates me, it's all the same across the board. It's my son. He's what drives me. I want to leave him some kind of legacy, something that he can be proud of, whether it's in my work, whether it's in my finances, it doesn't matter. I do it all for him to make him proud and go, man, my dad did something really cool, or my dad does something really cool. So it's my son, man. He keeps me motivated, and that's just what drives me in life.
Nice, man. Nice. I couldn't have answered it better myself. So I got one final thing for you to do, and that is sign off the show. Will you do me the honor of signing off the show tonight, Brett?
Absolutely. Thanks for listening. Thanks for checking out this awesome interview and this awesome podcast. And I'm Brett Montgomery, and I live uncontained.
And that does it for another episode of Uncontained. Thank you to Brett for joining me, and thank you for listening and letting me into your Corona isolation, and hopefully taking your mind off of it, giving you something to do, relieving the stir craziness for a little bit, because as I said, you can only reorganize stuff so many times in the house before you start feeling OCD. With that being said, I know you've heard it 100,000 times by now, probably. Social distancing, people. Make sure you're doing your part to help, as they say, squash the curve, or shorten the curve of this whole corona epidemic or pandemic going on. I apologize. I misspoke there, but do your part. Wash your hands, even though they're cracking. One thing I've done is when I've had to work, I've worn rubber gloves and washed the rubber gloves, saved my hands. So maybe that will help you out. But yeah, we're all in this thing together. I am sitting at home right now on the corona quarantine, so we'll get through this, people. We will, as a world, as a people. Maybe in the end, the separation will bring us all closer together, and that's my hippie moment for you right there. But really, what can you do right now? Just do your part. Stay clean. Don't hoard toilet paper. Don't hoard water. They're restocking stores, so that's gonna be there. And I appreciate everybody who is still working in the retail and grocery stores to keep the necessities flowing. So thank you very much, and continuing on, man. If you're doing any shopping through Amazon while you're home alone, please help out the show a little bit and click the Amazon link at the top of my website page, which is uncontainedpod.com. So just click that, shop as usual, and help support the show at the same time. I appreciate everybody out there. Stay safe, and stay isolated for now. Until next time, live isolated and uncontained at the same time. I know, it's hard to do. Sounds weird, but we gotta.